marble lobby of St. Clair Medical Center gleamed under crystal chandeliers. But the real spectacle wasn't the luxury, it was the scandal about to erupt. Reporters snapped photos, nurses whispered behind their masks, and at the center of it all stood Bradley Connors, a millionaire investor in a sharp navy suit, flashing his trademark smile for the cameras. Beside him, his new business partner, a woman half his age, laughed sweetly as he placed a proud hand on her waist. Then, from across the lobby, a trembling voice called his name. "Bradley?" Heads turned. A young woman stood at the entrance, drenched from the rain, clutching her stomach. Emily Sanders, 8 months pregnant, her soft features pale and frightened. She had come to tell her husband the baby wasn't moving. But the moment Bradley's eyes met hers, his smile froze. His face hardened into cold, public fury. "I told you never to come here," he hissed under his breath, his teeth clenched as cameras flashed. "Bradley, please," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm scared, our baby." Before she could finish, the slap cracked through the air. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sound echoed off marble walls like a gunshot. Emily stumbled backward, her hand on her cheek, disbelief flooding her eyes. Reporters froze, nurses covered their mouths. The millionaire everyone admired had just struck a pregnant woman, his own wife, in front of dozens of witnesses. Bradley's voice boomed, dripping venom. "She's not my wife. She's a crazy woman who's been stalking me for months. Get her out." Security hesitated, confused by the chaos. Emily reached for him again, but pain ripped through her abdomen like lightning. She tried to call his name one last time before her vision blurred. The ground tilted beneath her and she collapsed, her body trembling, one hand desperately clutching her belly. "Somebody help her," the nurse shouted. Doctors rushed forward, wheeling her toward the emergency ward. Bradley turned his back, straightening his tie, pretending not to care as whispers filled the room. His mistress looked horrified for a moment, then masked it with a nervous smile for the cameras. At the far end of the hall, a tall man in a black priest's coat watched quietly. Father Jonathan Reed had seen the entire thing, the cruelty, the fear, the silence that followed. He closed his eyes and whispered under his breath, "Lord, forgive him, for he knows not what storm he's just unleashed." Outside, thunder rolled across the Chicago sky. Inside, Emily's faint cry echoed down the corridor, "Please, save my baby." And as her heartbeat weakened, no one in that hospital, least of all Bradley Connors, knew that the next 24 hours would destroy everything he'd built. Because the woman he just struck wasn't just any pregnant wife. She was the heir to the empire that owned the very hospital he stood in. The fluorescent lights of the emergency ward flickered as nurses rushed Emily through the sliding doors. Her body trembled uncontrollably, her vision fading in and out. Every sound felt distant, the screech of wheels, the shout of orders, the rhythmic beeping of machines blending into a blur of panic and pain. "BP dropping," a nurse shouted. "We're losing her. Get an IV and stat." Emily tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The only thing she managed to whisper was, "My baby, please, save my baby." The doctor on call, a stern man in his 40s named Dr. Harper, frowned as he looked at the intake sheet. "No insurance, no emergency contact, and no confirmed identity," he muttered. "Is she even registered as a patient here?" One nurse hesitated. "She said her husband works with the hospital's board, Bradley Connors." Dr. Harper froze, his tone instantly changing. "Bradley Connors? The investor?" He sighed, irritation replacing empathy. "Get him down here to confirm. Until then, we can't proceed with the C-section authorization." Emily's pulse spiked. "Please," she cried weakly. "Don't wait. He won't come. He doesn't care." But the doctor turned away. "Hospital protocol, ma'am. I'm sorry." Tears streamed down her face. The monitors beeped faster, her oxygen levels dropping. She clutched her stomach as a searing pain tore through her abdomen. The baby wasn't moving. Panic filled her chest like fire. In the hallway, a small crowd began to gather. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's the woman from the lobby. He hit her, didn't he? Isn't that the millionaire's wife?" Bradley's assistant, a nervous man in a crisp gray suit, appeared at the nurse's station. "Mr. Connors said not to let anyone use his name for admission," he said flatly. "He wants all press inquiries redirected through his PR office." "What about the patient?" a nurse asked. "She's in critical condition." "That's not his responsibility," the assistant replied coldly before walking out. Inside the operating room, Emily's consciousness slipped further. Her mind floated somewhere between memory and nightmare. Bradley's proposal under fairy lights, the first ultrasound, his promise. "I'll never let anything happen to you." She let out a small sob. "You lied," her heart monitor wailed. "We're losing fetal heartbeat," a nurse shouted. "Doctor, we have to act now." Dr. Harper hesitated, torn between policy and compassion. Just then the door burst open. Father Jonathan strode in, breathless but determined. "Do it," he commanded. "I'll sign the consent." The doctor blinked. "And you are?" "I'm her family," the priest said firmly. "And if you let this woman die because of paperwork, may God have mercy on you." Something in his tone broke through the sterile bureaucracy. Dr. Harper grabbed his scalpel. "Prep for emergency C-section." Minutes blurred into chaos. The whir of machines filled the air, sterile instruments clattering onto trays. Sweat dripped down the doctor's temple. Finally, a cry. Weak, but real. Emily stirred. "Is he alive?" Father Jonathan smiled softly. "He's fighting, Emily, so are you." But just as relief began to wash over her, the door opened again. 2 hospital administrators entered, their faces pale. "Dr. Harper," one whispered urgently, "Mr. Connors just called. He says if you continue this unauthorized surgery, he'll have your license revoked." The doctor froze mid-motion. The room went silent except for the faint cry of the newborn. Father Jonathan turned slowly toward them, his eyes cold. "Then let him come," he said quietly, "because when this night ends, the only thing that will be revoked is his soul." Outside, the storm intensified. Inside, the war for Emily's life and her child's future had just begun. Morning broke over Chicago with gray light pouring through the hospital blinds. The chaos of the night had settled into an uneasy calm. Emily lay pale against the crisp sheets, her body weak but breathing steadily. The newborn slept in an incubator beside her, fragile and quiet, his heartbeat faint but steady. When the door opened, Dr. Harper entered with 2 administrators trailing behind. Their expressions were formal, too formal. Emily tried to sit up, but pain shot through her abdomen. "Doctor," she whispered. "My baby, is he okay?" Dr. Harper cleared his throat. "The infant is stable, but there are complications. You'll both need to remain under observation for at least 72 hours. Relief filled her chest, but it lasted only seconds before one of the administrators, a tall woman with sharp glasses, stepped forward holding a clipboard. "Miss Sanders," she said coolly, "we have an issue with your admission file. According to our records, you were not listed as Mr. Connors' spouse. Therefore, your treatment authorization is problematic." Emily blinked. "What are you talking about? I'm his wife. We were married 2 years ago. There's a certificate, photos." The woman cut her off, "All of which, I'm afraid, no longer exist in our digital system. Our legal department received an official statement from Mr. Bradley Connors this morning. He claims you are an imposter using his name to gain access to private medical care." The words hit her like another slap. "That's not true," Emily whispered. "He's lying. Ask anyone who was there at our wedding. Ask Father Jonathan." "We will verify," the administrator replied coldly. "But until your identity is confirmed, all medical costs will fall under self-pay. You'll need to settle the balance within 24 hours or vacate the room." Emily's throat tightened. "You can't be serious. I just gave birth." Dr. Harper looked away, guilt flashing in his eyes, but he said nothing. The administrators turned and left, heels clicking sharply against the tile. Emily buried her face in her hands, trembling. How could he do this to me? As if on cue, the TV mounted on the wall flickered to life. A morning news report blared across the screen. The headline made her blood run cold. "Investor Bradley Connors speaks out. Woman at hospital is a stalker pretending to be my wife." The footage showed Bradley outside the hospital, arm around his mistress, speaking confidently into microphones. "I feel terrible for her," he told reporters, feigning concern. "She clearly needs help. I hope she gets the psychological treatment she deserves." The camera cut to a shot of security guards wheeling Emily's stretcher from the lobby the night before. The headline repeated, "Unstable woman attacks investor, collapses after confrontation." Emily's breath caught. Oh God. She reached for the phone beside her bed, with shaking fingers, and dialed Bradley's number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Her heart pounded as she realized the depth of his betrayal. He wasn't just erasing her name, he was erasing her existence. A soft knock interrupted her panic. Father Jonathan stepped inside, holding a brown envelope. "Emily," he said gently, "you need to see this." Inside were photos, wedding photos, documents, a copy of her marriage license. But something was wrong. Every official stamp had been altered, the signatures digitally forged to invalidate them. Her stomach twisted. "He planned this," she whispered, "from the start." Father Jonathan nodded grimly. "He's not finished, Emily. He's preparing to file for defamation against you." Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling onto the hospital blanket. "How do I fight someone like him?" The priest placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to fight alone. There are powers in this world that even money can't silence." At that moment, Emily didn't yet know he had already made one phone call. To the only man powerful enough to bring Bradley Connors to his knees. The late afternoon sun bled through stained glass windows, scattering patches of crimson and gold across the quiet chapel inside St. Clair Hospital. Father Jonathan Reed stood near the altar, his hands clasped tightly around a worn rosary. He had been silent for hours, praying not just for Emily's safety, but for wisdom. The storm from the night before had calmed, but something darker now hovered in the air, an invisible chill that came not from nature, but from corruption. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. It was Nurse Evelyn, the only one in the hospital who had shown any compassion toward Emily. "Father," she whispered, glancing nervously around, "the administrators are talking about discharging her tonight. Mr. Connors ordered it personally." Jonathan's eyes snapped open. "She can't even walk, Evelyn. And the baby, he's still under observation." "I know," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "But they said if the bills aren't paid, they'll move her to the county facility. You know what that means." He did. It meant isolation, humiliation, and no protection. It meant Bradley Connors would win. The priest took a deep breath. "Thank you, my child," he said softly. "Go back to her. Keep her calm." When she left, Father Jonathan walked to his small office in the chapel's back corridor. He opened an old drawer, revealing a black rotary phone, one that had rung only once in 10 years. Next to it was a single card, aged and creased, with a name written in gold letters, Roy Sanders. He hesitated. 3 years had passed since the last time they spoke. Back then, Roy had been furious. His daughter had abandoned her wealthy family to marry a man beneath her, a man he had warned her about. Now, that man had almost destroyed her. Jonathan exhaled slowly and dialed. The call connected after 2 rings. "This is Roy Sanders." His voice was deep, commanding, the kind that made boardrooms fall silent. "Roy," Jonathan said, his tone grave. "It's Jonathan Reed." There was a pause, then sharp recognition. "Jonathan, I thought you'd taken a vow of silence after what she did." "I almost did," the priest replied quietly, "but I'm breaking it now, for Emily." Another pause. The rustle of papers, a faint sigh. "What's happened?" Jonathan told him everything. The slap, the hospital scandal, the forged marriage license, the public humiliation. As the story unfolded, the other end of the line went deathly still. When he finished, Roy's voice was no longer calm. It was icy. "Where is she?" "Room 412, Jonathan said. "She's weak, Roy. Too weak to fight him alone." There was a low growl of restrained rage. "I warned that snake," Roy muttered. "I told him if he ever laid a hand on her." "Then keep your promise," Jonathan interrupted gently. "She needs her father now, not your anger." Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, Roy spoke. "Jonathan, listen carefully. No one, no doctor, no guard, lets that man near her again. Do you understand me?" "I do." "And tell Emily," Roy continued, his tone softening for the first time, "her father never stopped watching over her, even when she thought he had." Jonathan felt something shift in his chest, a fragile hope he hadn't felt in years. "I'll tell her," he whispered. When he hung up, the priest looked toward the crucifix above his desk. "Forgive me, Lord," he murmured, "for what's about to happen." Outside, in the hospital's private parking lot, a black limousine rolled past the security gate. The driver wore gloves. The license plate bore no number, only the emblem of the Sanders Foundation, the conglomerate that secretly owned half the hospital's board. Inside that car sat Roy Sanders himself, eyes like steel, phone still pressed to his ear. "Bradley Connors," he said coldly, "doesn't know who he just slapped." And for the first time in years, Father Jonathan allowed himself a faint, grim smile. By the next morning, the story had exploded across every major news outlet in Chicago. tabloids printed her photo, pale, terrified, being wheeled into the emergency room, under headlines that screamed, "Pregnant stalker collapses after attacking investor." Not one article mentioned the slap. Not one called her by her real name. Inside the luxurious downtown ballroom of the Connors Grand Hotel, Bradley stood behind a podium draped with his company's logo. Dozens of cameras flashed. He adjusted his tie, practiced sympathy painted across his face. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice calm and measured. "I'm here to address last night's unfortunate incident at St. Clair Medical Center." He paused just long enough for the tension to thicken. "A woman claiming to be my wife confronted me in a very public and distressing manner. I want to be clear. This individual is not and has never been my legal spouse." Gasps from the press. His PR agent, a sharp-eyed blonde named Clara Vance, stood off to the side, nodding approvingly. Every word had been rehearsed. Bradley continued, lowering his tone to feigned pity. "She's clearly struggling with psychological issues. My only wish is that she receives the medical care she needs. It breaks my heart to see someone in such pain." He clasped his hands like a saint. The crowd swallowed every word. A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Connors, witnesses say you struck the woman. Was that true?" Bradley's expression hardened, just for a second. Then came the performance. "Absolutely not. She stumbled toward me. Security misinterpreted what happened. I would never harm a woman, let alone someone expecting a child." The room murmured with approval. Cameras clicked. "And to clarify," he added smoothly, "this woman is not pregnant with my child. There is no connection between us. My legal team is already working with authorities to ensure she gets the help she needs." In the back row, one cameraman exchanged a look with another. Something in Bradley's confidence seemed off, rehearsed. Meanwhile, at St. Clair Hospital, Emily watched the live broadcast on a small wall-mounted television. Her hands shook as she heard every lie spill from his lips. The image of him, composed, adored, unpunished, burned into her mind like acid. "God? He's turning me into a monster," she whispered. Nurse Evelyn stood beside her, furious. "He's lying straight to America's face. We saw what happened." Emily stared at the screen, her voice breaking. "And no one will believe me." Father Jonathan entered the room quietly, holding a small newspaper folded in half. "You don't need them to," he said softly. "You just need one man to believe, and he's already on his way." Emily looked at him, confused. "Who?" But before he could answer, the door burst open. Two men in suits, hospital security, stepped inside. "Miss Sanders," one said stiffly, "we've been instructed to escort you off the property. Your account is unpaid, and you've been deemed a security risk to our staff." Emily's eyes widened. "You can't. My baby. He's still in the incubator." Father Jonathan stepped between them. "You'll lay one hand on her, and you'll answer to the church and the law," he warned. The guards hesitated. One spoke into his earpiece, receiving new orders. Then he turned to Jonathan. "Sir, if you wish to assist her, you'll need to move her immediately. The board's meeting in 30 minutes. Mr. Connors wants her gone before then." The priest's jaw tightened. "Understood," he said calmly. "We'll be gone long before that." As they left, Emily clutched the priest's sleeve. "Father, where are we going?" He looked down at her with steady eyes. "To meet the man who taught Bradley Connors what power really is." Outside, a convoy of black cars rolled toward the hospital gates. In the lead vehicle sat Roy Sanders, his expression carved from stone. Bradley's press conference was only halfway done, but his empire, he just didn't know it yet, was already beginning to crumble. The small chapel smelled faintly of candle wax and old wood polish. Emily sat on one of the pews, her face pale under the dim light, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Outside, she could still hear the echo of Bradley's lies playing over and over on every television and phone screen in the city. To the world, she was a delusional woman. To him, she was already erased. Father Jonathan returned from the hospital corridor carrying a sealed manila envelope. "Emily," he said gently, "I had Nurse Evelyn retrieve this from your belongings before they moved you. You should look." Inside were what little she had left. Her wedding photos, the marriage certificate, a few letters Bradley had written her back when he still pretended to love. She spread them across the pew, desperate for proof that she wasn't losing her mind. But something was wrong. The documents were different. Signatures blurred, dates shifted, Even the officiant's name had been altered. Her stomach dropped. "These aren't the originals," she whispered. Jonathan examined the papers, his brows knitting together. These were tampered with. He must have replaced them long before this. Emily's voice broke. "He planned it all, even before I got pregnant." The priest nodded grimly. "He's preparing to destroy your credibility completely. Once the legal version of your marriage disappears, he can claim you forged everything. You'll have no rights, to the child, to his assets, to your name." Emily pressed her trembling hands against her face. "How could I be so blind?" Jonathan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Love blinds everyone, child, but faith opens what love conceals." She gave a bitter laugh. "Faith won't stand in court." Before he could respond, the chapel door creaked open. Nurse Evelyn slipped inside, clutching her phone. "Father, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. She turned the screen toward them, a live feed of a news station. Bradley's lawyer, a smug man named Raymond Locke, was speaking to the press. "Our client has filed a restraining order against Miss Emily Sanders," he declared. "We are also pursuing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. This woman fabricated documents to exploit Mr. Connor's generosity." Emily stared, speechless. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. "He's pressing charges against me?" "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "And they've frozen your bank account, every penny." Emily felt the world tilt beneath her. All she could hear was the echo of Bradley's laughter in her memory. "You'd be nothing without me." Father Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Not yet, she isn't." He walked toward his desk, opening a hidden drawer. Inside lay a small flash drive. "Emily, before you left him, did you ever use his laptop?" She blinked through tears. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because he's arrogant," the priest said. "Men like him never think anyone's watching. I asked someone I trust to mirror his company's security servers months ago, just in case." He plugged the flash drive into his tablet. Lines of code appeared, then a series of video thumbnails. One in particular caught Emily's eye. The date was from 6 months ago. Jonathan tapped it. The screen showed Bradley in his office, arguing with his lawyer. "Make sure the old files are gone," Bradley barked. "Delete every trace of the first marriage certificate. If she ever tries to use it, I'll ruin her. I'll ruin them all." Emily gasped. "You have him. You have proof." Jonathan nodded, a flicker of triumph in his tired eyes. "Enough to bring his empire down, yes. But we'll need help, someone with power and the means to make this public." He looked at her meaningfully. "That's why I called your father." Emily's breath caught. "He's here?" The chapel door opened again, flooding the room with blinding light. A tall man in a black overcoat stepped inside, his silver hair glinting beneath the stained glass. His presence filled the air like a storm. "Hello, Emily," Roy Sanders said softly. "It's time your husband learned who you really are." Roy Sanders' arrival hit the hospital like an earthquake. Within an hour, every executive on the board knew the name. The billionaire philanthropist whose foundation practically kept St. Clair Medical Center alive. When he strode through the lobby, even the guards straightened as if the floor itself had rules again. But upstairs, in the hospital penthouse suite reserved for VIP donors, another kind of storm was brewing. Bradley Connors paced the marble floor, phone glued to his ear, voice sharp with panic disguised as control. "I don't care what it costs, Raymond," he snapped. "Erase the footage, all of it. I want every camera in that lobby wiped clean before the end of the day." On the other end, his lawyer mumbled something about investigations and subpoenas. Bradley slammed the phone down, jaw tight. "Useless," he muttered. Across the room, Vanessa Hale, the mistress the world now thought was his fiancée, sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching a champagne glass she hadn't touched. Her reflection trembled in the dark window behind her. She had spent the last 24 hours scrolling through endless headlines, all painting Emily as insane. Each lie left a sour taste in her throat. "Bradley," she said softly, "the press is asking questions. They want to know why the hospital still hasn't released the patient's records. People are starting to—" "People believe whatever I tell them to," he cut her off. "You don't get it, Vanessa. Perception is truth." She hesitated, studying him, the man who once promised her the world but whose eyes now glinted with cruelty. "What if she really was your wife?" Bradley turned slowly, his smile thin and venomous. "Then she should have stayed in her place. I made her somebody, and now she wants to destroy me? No one humiliates Bradley Connors. Vanessa's stomach twisted. She remembered a different conversation months ago, one where he'd told her, "We're soulmates. Emily's out of the picture for good." Back then, she believed him. But now, the illusion was cracking. Her phone buzzed. A private message. She glanced down and froze. The sender was anonymous, but the text read, "We know what he did to you. Meet me in the chapel. Alone." For a moment, she hesitated. Then curiosity and guilt won. Downstairs, the chapel was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of candles. Father Jonathan waited near the altar, his posture calm, but his eyes sharp. When Vanessa entered, he spoke first. "Miss Hale, thank you for coming." She folded her arms. "How do you know my name?" "I know more than your name," the priest said. "I know you were pregnant once, and that he made you end it." The words hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth to deny it, but her voice caught. "How? How do you know that?" Jonathan stepped closer. "Because he bragged about it. Because I've heard his threats. And because now he's doing the same thing to another woman, one who doesn't deserve to lose everything the way you did." Vanessa looked down, tears blurring her vision. "He said it was my choice." "No," the priest said gently. "He took your choice away, and if you let him keep lying, he'll hurt more people. Maybe even that child upstairs." Her breathing quickened. She thought of Emily's pale face on the news, the baby in the incubator, the emptiness in her own chest. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I recorded him once," she whispered, "after he told me to disappear. I kept it because I couldn't let myself forget who he really was." Father Jonathan nodded. "Give me the recording. It's time the world hears his real voice." Vanessa handed it over, trembling. "He'll destroy me for this." The priest looked her straight in the eyes. "Not this time. He's already destroyed himself." As she turned to leave, thunder rolled outside. Upstairs, Bradley raised another toast to his own genius, unaware that his downfall had just been captured in a single file named ConnorsConfession.mp3. By the time evening fell, the sky above Chicago was a curtain of sleet and wind. The snow came down in sideways gusts that rattled the hospital windows, but inside St. Clair, the chill had nothing to do with the weather. Word had spread that Bradley Connors had personally requested the removal. Emily sat in her hospital bed, still weak, her newborn asleep in the incubator beside her. Nurse Evelyn entered quietly, her expression tight. "They're coming for you," she whispered. Emily frowned. "Who?" Evelyn's voice broke. "Security. The board approved it. Mr. Connors threatened to pull his funding if they didn't remove you tonight." The words didn't register at first. "They can't," Emily murmured. "My baby's barely breathing on his own." "They don't care," Evelyn said. "They said you're a liability." Before Emily could respond, the door burst open. 2 hospital security guards stepped in, dressed in black coats, faces blank. The taller one held a clipboard. "Miss Sanders," he said stiffly, "you need to vacate this room immediately. The hospital can't continue treatment without verified insurance or payment." Emily's heart pounded. "You can't make me leave. My son, please, he needs the incubator." The guard's tone didn't waver. "If you refuse, we'll have to escort you off the property." Evelyn moved in front of them, shaking her head. "She's a patient, not a criminal. Have you no conscience?" The guards hesitated, but the order was clear. "Ma'am, step aside." Emily clutched the blanket around her. "At least let me hold him," she whispered. "Just once." One guard looked away, guilt flickering across his eyes. "Make it quick." Evelyn gently lifted the tiny infant from the incubator and placed him in Emily's arms. He was so small, barely 5 pounds, his skin soft as paper. She traced his cheek with a trembling finger. "Mommy's here," she whispered. "You're safe, baby." But she wasn't. When they wheeled her out through the back corridor, the cold air hit her like knives. Snow swirled in the floodlights. The hospital that had once felt like a sanctuary now loomed above her like a fortress of betrayal. "Where are you taking me?" she asked weakly. "The administration said you're to be released to a county shelter," the guard said. "They'll arrange transportation." A shelter. The word struck harder than the slap that started it all. Just as despair settled over her, a familiar voice cut through the storm. "That won't be necessary." Father Jonathan stepped out from the shadows, his long coat whipping in the wind. Behind him, a black SUV idled, its headlights slicing through the snow. "She's under my care now," he told the guards, handing them a document with an embossed seal. You'll find this signed by the hospital's legal department and by Mr. Roy Sanders." The guards blinked, suddenly pale. "The Roy Sanders?" "Yes," Jonathan said flatly. "The same Roy Sanders who happens to own 30% of this hospital." The men stepped back instantly. "Sir, we didn't know. Now you do." The priest leaned forward, his tone ice. "And if you ever lay a hand on this woman again, pray that confession still means something." They left without another word. Evelyn helped Emily into the SUV, wrapping her in a thick blanket. Inside, the heater blasted warm air, but Emily still shivered, holding her sleeping child close. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. Father Jonathan met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "To someone who's been waiting 3 years for this night. Someone who's finally ready to make things right." As the SUV pulled away from the hospital, the snow fell heavier, swallowing the building in white silence. In the top-floor suite, Bradley Connors raised a glass of scotch to his reflection, unaware that his power had just started to melt away. One snowflake at a time. The black SUV glided through the icy streets of downtown Chicago, headlights slicing the snow like silver knives. Inside, Emily clutched her newborn against her chest, wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her body trembled, not just from the cold, but from the storm raging inside her. Fear, humiliation, exhaustion, and something else she hadn't felt in a long time, disbelief that her father might still care. Father Jonathan's voice broke the silence. "He's waiting for you," he said quietly. "Try not to be afraid." "I'm not afraid," Emily whispered, though her voice shook. "I just don't know what to say to him." "You'll know when you see him," the priest replied. The SUV turned onto Lakeshore Drive and stopped in front of a glass tower overlooking the frozen water. Security men in dark coats waited by the entrance, forming a line as the doors opened automatically. Inside, the lobby of Sanders Global headquarters gleamed like a cathedral of steel and marble. Gold plaques lined the walls, hospitals, charities, research centers, all funded by the Sanders Foundation. Emily had walked these halls as a teenager, before she ran away to marry Bradley. Back then, her father's empire had felt like a prison. Now it looked like protection. The elevator opened onto the top floor. A long hallway led to a set of oak doors carved with the Sanders crest. Father Jonathan gestured toward them. "Go on, he's inside." Emily hesitated, then stepped forward. Her reflection followed her in the polished glass until she reached the doors. They opened with a soft click. Her father was standing by the window, looking out over the city. His once dark hair was streaked with silver now, but his posture was the same, tall, commanding, unyielding. When he turned, his blue-gray eyes met hers, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Finally, Roy Sanders broke the silence. "You look just like your mother," he said. Emily's lip trembled. "You shouldn't have come." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think I'd let that man destroy you, my only child?" "I left you," she said quietly. "You warned me about him, and I didn't listen." "Yes," Roy said, "and you paid for it. But that doesn't mean you deserve to be buried by his lies." He walked closer, his voice lowering. "You're still my daughter, Emily, and no one touches what's mine." Her knees nearly gave out. "He ruined everything, Dad. He made the world think I'm crazy. He took my name, my proof, even my child's right to exist." Roy's expression hardened. "Then we'll take everything from him. His company, his reputation, his freedom. I've already contacted the board of St. Clair. As of this morning, Bradley Connors no longer holds a single share in the hospital." Emily stared. "You can do that?" A faint smirk touched his lips. "Sweetheart, I own the hospital." She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Father Jonathan stepped forward, handing Roy a small flash drive. "This contains video proof. Recordings of Bradley discussing the forged documents, the deleted records, everything." Roy accepted it with a nod. "We'll give this to the authorities. But before the law gets him, I want the truth public. I want every camera that once adored him turned against him." Emily looked up, tears brimming. "You'd really do that? For me?" Roy's voice softened. "I should have done it 3 years ago." He brushed a tear from her cheek with a surprisingly gentle hand. "You don't have to fight anymore." For the first time in years, Emily felt safe. The weight on her chest loosened. Her baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and Roy's gaze dropped to his grandson. "What's his name?" he asked quietly. "Leo," she whispered, after Mom's favorite constellation. Roy smiled faintly, his eyes wet. Then let's make sure he grows up in a world where that name means something again. Outside, the snowstorm raged on. But for Emily Sanders, the long winter of her silence had finally begun to thaw. The next morning, Chicago awoke to whispers of something brewing inside the city's most powerful hospital. Reporters swarmed the gates of St. Clair Medical Center, their cameras trained on the entrance as if waiting for ghosts to walk out. But inside, something far greater than gossip was about to unfold. Roy Sanders arrived just after dawn, stepping out of a black limousine flanked by 2 attorneys and Father Jonathan. The hospital director, a nervous man named Dr. Mitchell, rushed forward to greet him. "Mr. Sanders, I didn't expect." "I'm sure you didn't," Roy interrupted, his voice low but sharp. "Where's the boardroom?" Dr. Mitchell hesitated. "Sir, Mr. Connor scheduled a private meeting there." "Good," Roy said. "Then I won't have to waste time finding him." Upstairs, Bradley Connors sat at the head of a polished oak table, smiling confidently at a dozen board members. His PR agent, Clara Vance, whispered last-minute talking points into his ear. "Stay calm," she said. "If Sanders shows up, deny everything. We'll control the narrative." Bradley leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Let him try." The door swung open. Roy Sanders strode in, followed by Emily, pale but composed, holding baby Leo in her arms. Gasps rippled through the room. Every eye turned to the woman Bradley had called a liar. Bradley shot to his feet, the color draining from his face. "What the hell is this?" Roy's tone was calm, almost casual. "A family reunion, and a reckoning." Emily stood silent, her father's hand steady on her shoulder. Roy turned to the board. "Gentlemen, as of this morning, my foundation has frozen all pending donations to St. Clair until we address the corruption poisoning this institution." Dr. Mitchell paled. "Mr. Sanders, please. There's no corruption." Roy's eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind if I show the board something?" He nodded to Father Jonathan, who placed a laptop on the table and clicked play. The room filled with Bradley's voice, recorded from Vanessa's phone. "Delete every trace of that marriage certificate. If she talks, I'll ruin her. I'll ruin them all." The boardroom fell silent. Every face turned toward Bradley, who froze mid-breath. That's fabricated," he stammered. Roy's lawyer slid a folder across the table. "We verified the metadata. It's authentic." Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "You told the world I was insane. You destroyed every proof of our life together, every promise. But this is your voice. You can't erase that." Bradley's mask cracked. "You think anyone will believe you now? I own this hospital." Roy stepped forward, his presence towering. "Correction. You did. I just bought out your remaining shares. You have nothing here, Bradley. Not even your name." The silence that followed was deafening. Cameras from the hospital's internal security, invited by Roy, captured every word. Bradley's confidence finally broke. "You can't do this. You'll regret crossing me." Roy leaned in, his tone almost gentle. "You crossed the wrong woman, son." Father Jonathan crossed himself quietly, "and the wrong God." At that moment, 2 uniformed officers entered the room. "Bradley Connors?" one asked. "You're under arrest for document forgery, fraud, and assault." Bradley's face twisted in disbelief. "You set me up." "No," Roy said coldly. "You set yourself up." As the officers cuffed him, reporters outside caught the moment. The once charming millionaire led through the hospital's lobby in handcuffs, his empire collapsing behind him. Emily stood by the window, holding Leo close. Her father turned to her, voice softening. "It's over." She looked down at her sleeping son. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." Outside, the morning sun pierced through the gray clouds for the first time in days, spilling golden light across St. Clair Medical Center, the place where Emily Sanders had lost everything and now reclaimed her name. The city buzzed with the shock of Bradley Connors' arrest. Every news station replayed the footage. The millionaire, once praised as a visionary, now being led through St. Clair's lobby in handcuffs, shouting about conspiracies and fake evidence. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Inside, the storm had only begun. In a private suite at Sanders' global headquarters, Emily sat beside her father, cradling Leo as he slept. She should have felt peace, but her heart still trembled. "It's not over, is it?" she asked quietly. Roy looked up from the stack of legal documents spread across the table. "Not yet. Men like him always find a way to crawl back. But this time, we'll bury him with the truth." Father Jonathan stood by the window, watching reporters swarm the building below. "The press is devouring this," he said. "They're calling you the silent heiress. They don't know what to believe yet." Emily sighed. "They still think I'm fragile, helpless." Her father smiled faintly. "Then show them you're not." He handed her a folder. Inside were copies of every falsified document Bradley had created, each one now verified as tampered with. Beneath them lay her original marriage certificate, stamped, notarized, untouched. "I kept a copy," Roy said simply. "I didn't trust him from the start. I knew one day the truth would need to speak louder than love." Emily's throat tightened. "You saved this all these years?" "I saved you," he corrected softly. Before she could reply, the door opened and Roy's head of security entered. "Sir, there's someone requesting a meeting. Vanessa Hale." The name froze the air. Emily's heart skipped. "His mistress?" Roy nodded to the guard. "Bring her in." Vanessa walked in slowly, her eyes shadowed but determined. Gone was the polished glamour of the woman who once stood beside Bradley at parties. She looked human now, tired, remorseful, almost fragile. "I'm not here to defend him," she began. "I'm here to finish what I started." She placed a small recorder on the table. "That night, after your father's call to the police, Bradley came to my apartment. He was furious. He said he'd destroy every last person who stood against him. I recorded everything." Roy leaned forward. "Does it include names?" Vanessa nodded. "Investors, lawyers, even a judge he bribed to seal your marriage record." The room went silent. Father Jonathan crossed himself. "My God." Emily looked at Vanessa with a mixture of shock and pity. "Why are you helping us?" Tears glimmered in Vanessa's eyes. "Because I believed his lies once too. I lost a child because of him. When I saw what he did to you, I couldn't live with that silence anymore." Emily reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for ending the silence." Roy turned to his legal team. "I want that file copied, archived, and delivered to the district attorney within the hour. Then release it to every major news network." Vanessa blinked. "You're going public?" "Yes," Roy said. "If Bradley wanted attention, we'll give him the world's spotlight, just not the way he imagined." As his team moved quickly, Emily held Leo close, her mind spinning. If the world sees everything, they'll finally know who he really is. Her father's gaze softened, and who you really are. Outside, a breaking news banner lit up every TV screen in the city. Exclusive evidence: Bradley Connors caught in multi-million-dollar fraud and forgery scheme. For the first time, Emily didn't hide from the headlines. She stood tall, her reflection in the window clear and steady. "This isn't just his fall," she said quietly. "It's my beginning." Father Jonathan smiled. "Then let's make sure the world never forgets it." And as the night lights of Chicago shimmered below, the story of Emily Sanders, the woman he tried to erase, was finally becoming the story of his ruin. By sunrise, Bradley Connors' name had become poison. Every network in America ran the same footage: his arrest, his mistress's confession, his private rants leaking online. News anchors dissected every frame, every quote. On social media, hashtags exploded: "Justice for Emily," "Baby Leo," and the one that stunned Bradley the most: "Liar in Luxury." For the first time in months, Emily Sanders was no longer a ghost. She was a woman whose pain had a voice, and the nation was listening. Inside Sanders Tower, the media team scrambled to manage the flood. Phones rang non-stop, cameras lined the sidewalks, and the building lobby buzzed with reporters demanding a statement. Roy's communications director rushed into the private conference room. "Sir, every outlet wants an exclusive. CNN, The Times, even late-night shows. They all want her." Roy glanced at his daughter, seated beside him. Emily wore a simple gray sweater, her hair tied loosely, no makeup, yet her calmness commanded the room. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We can issue a written statement. Let the evidence speak." Emily shook her head. "He lied about me in public. I need to tell the truth in public." Father Jonathan smiled faintly from across the table. "Spoken like your mother." Roy gave a short nod, pride softening his stern features. "Then we do this right. You speak once, clearly, with dignity. After that, silence. Let the world decide." An hour later, the press conference began. The room filled with reporters, cameras blinking like a storm of artificial lightning. Emily stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling only slightly. Roy stood behind her, silent support carved in human form. She took a breath. 3 years ago, I fell in love with a man who promised forever. Instead, he gave me scars, some you can't see." Her voice wavered, but she steadied it. "When I found the courage to speak, he erased me. He called me insane, forged my name, and left me to die in the hospital that bore my family's name." The crowd was silent. Even the clicking of cameras slowed. "But I survived," she continued, "because truth doesn't die in silence. It waits for light." Her eyes found the nearest lens. "To every woman watching this who's been told she's crazy, who's been silenced, who's been made small, please hear me. You are not what they say you are. You are what you survive." The room erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions, but Emily raised a hand. "I'm not here to ruin anyone. I'm here to reclaim what was stolen. My dignity, my name, and my child's future." She turned slightly, her voice softening. "I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." Father Jonathan bowed his head. Roy blinked hard, turning away to hide the emotion in his eyes. Within minutes, her speech flooded the internet. Millions shared it, quoting her final line, "You are what you survive." Morning shows replayed it every hour. Commentators called her a modern symbol of grace under fire. Meanwhile, in a holding cell downtown, Bradley watched the broadcast through metal bars. His jaw tightened as Emily's face filled the TV screen. The same public that once adored him now cheered her. He slammed his fist against the wall, shouting, "Turn it off!" But it was too late. His empire was gone, his image shattered, and the one woman he'd tried to erase now stood taller than ever. Back at Sanders Tower, Emily stood by the window, looking down at the crowd of supporters gathered outside. Women holding signs, strangers chanting her name. Her father stepped beside her. "They believe you now." She nodded slowly, her voice calm. "They believe the truth." Outside, the city lights shimmered like 1,000 candles, and for the first time in years, Emily didn't feel small, she felt seen. The press conference had barely ended when Emily's body began to betray her again. At first, it was just a cramp, a dull ache low in her abdomen as she spoke her final words to the crowd. But by the time she returned to the suite at Sanders Tower, the pain had turned sharp, rhythmic, unstoppable. She tried to hide it. She smiled for the cameras, waved to supporters, and whispered to Leo as he slept in his crib beside the podium. But when she stepped off stage, her knees buckled. "Emily?" Father Jonathan caught her just in time. "You're pale. What's wrong?" Her hand pressed against her stomach. "It's too soon. It's too early for another contraction." Roy turned from his conversation with reporters, instantly alert. "Get the doctor," he barked. The crowd around them dissolved into chaos as paramedics rushed forward. Within minutes, she was back in an ambulance, sirens wailing through downtown Chicago. Her vision blurred with each contraction. All she could see were fragments. Her father's face etched with worry, Father Jonathan holding her hand, the city lights streaking past the window like dying stars. At St. Clair Medical Center, the same hospital that had thrown her out days ago, the scene flipped. The moment they saw Roy Sanders step out of the ambulance, every staff member snapped into motion. The CEO himself came running. "Full suite ready, sir," he stammered. "Our best obstetrician is waiting." Emily barely registered the words as they wheeled her down the hall. The same hall where Bradley had once slapped her to the floor. The memory cut through her pain like glass. For a moment, she saw herself again. Bleeding, humiliated, forgotten. But not this time. As they reached the operating room, she grabbed Father Jonathan's sleeve. "Promise me," she whispered through gritted teeth. "Promise me my son won't grow up afraid." He squeezed her hand. "He'll grow up knowing his mother was braver than most armies." Inside, the lights were bright, almost blinding. Doctors surrounded her, calling out vitals, monitoring the monitors. Roy stood just outside the glass wall, fists clenched, powerless for once in his life. Then, something went wrong. Blood pressure dropping. A nurse cried, "We're losing the fetal heartbeat." Panic rippled through the room. The doctor shouted orders, but Emily barely heard. Everything faded into a thick, muffled silence. She saw only flashes, the monitor beeping faster, the doctors moving quicker, her own hand reaching toward the tiny bassinet where Leo waited. Not again, she thought. Not now. In the hallway, Roy's composure cracked. "Do something," he shouted. "Save them both." Father Jonathan closed his eyes and began to pray softly, his voice steady even as chaos roared around him. "Lord, deliver them from pain. Let this suffering not be in vain." Then, a sound pierced the noise. A cry, not weak this time, strong, full of life. Inside the room, Emily blinked back tears as a nurse placed Leo in her arms. He was small, pink, and angry at the world, but alive. She kissed his forehead, sobbing in relief. Roy stepped in, unable to hide the tears streaking down his face. "You scared me half to death, young lady." Emily smiled weakly. "Guess I'd take after you." The doctor approached, smiling. "Both mother and child are stable. You've got a fighter, Mr. Sanders." Roy looked down at Leo and whispered, "He comes from a line of them." Outside, reporters already knew what had happened. The same hospital that once shamed her had now witnessed her strength. Photos of Emily holding Leo flooded the internet, captioned, "The mother who rose again." From his cell, Bradley saw the image on a flickering TV. The sight of her alive, radiant, untouchable, broke something in him. For the first time, he didn't curse. He just stared, hollow-eyed at the woman he could never erase. And miles away, under the quiet hum of the hospital lights, Emily kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, "We made it, Leo. This time, no one takes us away." Morning sunlight streamed through the wide hospital windows, soft and golden. For once, St. Clair Medical Center felt peaceful. Not the battlefield of humiliation Emily had known before, but a sanctuary washed clean by truth. The nurses moved quietly around the recovery suite, whispering to each other as if afraid to disturb the calm that had finally descended. Emily lay in bed, pale but glowing, her son sleeping soundly on her chest. His tiny breaths rose and fell in rhythm with hers. She traced a finger along his cheek and smiled faintly. "Leo," she whispered, "you're the strongest thing I've ever made." Father Jonathan entered the room, holding a small wooden cross. "He's already a miracle, Emily. The doctors say his heart rate is perfect." She smiled tiredly. Maybe he knows it's finally over. But it wasn't, at least not entirely. Moments later, the door opened again, and Roy Sanders stepped in, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. His face was softer now, less the titan of business, and more the father who had spent years pretending he didn't miss his daughter. He approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward Leo. Emily nodded, eyes glistening. Roy bent down and gently lifted the baby from her arms. For a long moment, he simply looked at his grandson, the faintest trace of tears forming at the corners of his eyes. "He's perfect," Roy said quietly. "You named him well, Leo, lion-hearted." "He's going to need that heart," Emily murmured. "The world can be cruel." Roy looked at her with a hint of pride. "Then he'll have his mother's courage and his grandfather's stubbornness. I think that's enough armor for anyone." Father Jonathan chuckled softly from the corner. "That combination could conquer kingdoms." Roy smiled faintly. "Or rebuild one." He turned toward the window, the city skyline glowing beneath the morning light. "I've already made arrangements. The board of the foundation is announcing Leo as the official heir of the Sanders estate. The public will know that the future of this empire is secure and protected." Emily's eyes widened. "Dad, he's just a baby." Roy nodded. "And one day, he'll inherit a legacy built on more than wealth. He'll inherit integrity, resilience, and truth. Qualities this family lost for a time, but you've restored them." For the first time in years, Emily didn't argue. She simply looked at her father, gratitude softening the exhaustion etched into her face. "You really mean it, don't you?" Roy's voice cracked slightly. "I've spent half my life building things I thought mattered. Turns out what mattered most was something I almost lost." Emily reached out and took his hand. "You didn't lose me, Dad. I just had to find myself first." He squeezed her hand gently, then turned to Father Jonathan. "You've done more for us than I could ever repay." The priest smiled warmly. "You can repay me by living in truth. That's all any soul can do." As they spoke, a nurse entered holding a small envelope. "Miss Sanders, this just arrived for you," she said, handing it over. Emily frowned, opening it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, no signature, no sender. Just 4 words, "The fight isn't over." Her pulse quickened. Father Jonathan noticed the shift in her expression. "What is it?" "Someone knows," she whispered, clutching the note. Roy's expression hardened. "Whoever's still protecting Bradley will regret this." But Emily shook her head, her gaze distant. "No. Whoever sent this isn't threatening me. They're warning me." She looked down at Leo, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the world waiting beyond those walls. "I don't know what's coming next," she whispered, kissing her son's forehead. "But whatever it is, He'll never face it alone. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall again, dusting the hospital gardens in white. A new beginning had arrived, but the shadows hadn't vanished completely. And somewhere, far from St. Clair's walls, a man in a dark suit burned with hatred inside his prison cell, vowing that his story wasn't finished yet. The following week, St. Clair Medical Center was transformed. What had once been Bradley Connor's kingdom now trembled under the weight of a single name, Roy Sanders. Every executive, every board member, every shareholder had been summoned for an emergency session. The order came directly from the Sanders Foundation, and no one dared refuse. At the top floor, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Men in $1,000 suits whispered nervously, their eyes darting toward the double doors. Some had profited quietly from Bradley's deceit. Others had turned a blind eye. All of them knew Judgment Day had arrived. When the doors finally opened, silence fell like a blade. Roy entered first, his presence commanding. Emily followed, dressed simply in a cream blouse and navy blazer. She wasn't there as a victim anymore. She stood as a witness. Father Jonathan walked behind them, holding a sealed folder marked Evidence Confidential. Dr. Mitchell, the hospital's director, cleared his throat. Mr. Sanders, we appreciate your presence, but I must remind you, this board meeting was meant to discuss the institution's financial restructuring. Roy didn't even sit down. It will, he said evenly, because the corruption that bled this hospital's honor dry is a financial matter. He turned to Emily. Would you like to begin? Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but cutting through the silence like glass. 2 weeks ago, I was dragged out of this hospital while carrying my son. I was called a liar, a fraud, and an intruder. The man responsible was celebrated in this very room. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Emily opened the folder Father Jonathan handed her and began distributing photos, screenshots, bank transfers, voice transcripts. Every transaction here links back to Bradley Connors. He used hospital funds to launder money through shell charities, some of which bear your names. Gasps filled the room. Dr. Mitchell paled. This can't be true. Roy's lawyer stood. It's all verified by the district attorney's office. What's more, half of you signed off on these accounts. Panic broke out. One board member stammered, "We didn't know what he was doing." "You knew enough," Roy interrupted. His tone was low, controlled. "You looked the other way because it was profitable." Emily's eyes swept the room, cold and clear. "You all watched him destroy me, and you said nothing. But silence doesn't make you innocent. It makes you accomplices." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Roy spoke again. "Effective immediately, every member who took part in Connors's cover-ups will resign. Their shares revert to the foundation. St. Clair will return to its purpose, healing, not hiding." One man stood defiantly. "You can't force us out. You may have power, Sanders, but we have influence." Roy's gaze hardened. "Influence dies when it loses credibility. Check your phones." Every phone in the room buzzed. Notifications flooded in. Breaking news, financial scandals, leaked audits. The files had just gone public. Gasps turned into groans. One by one, the board members realized the truth. Their careers were over. Emily looked to her father, her voice steady. "You did it." Roy shook his head. "No, we did. You faced the monster. I just cut off its head." Father Jonathan closed his folder. "Justice isn't revenge, it's restoration. Today, this hospital begins to heal." Dr. Mitchell, humbled, turned to Emily. "Miss Sanders, on behalf of St. Clair Medical Center, I owe you an apology. We all do." Emily nodded, emotion flickering behind her calm. "Don't apologize to me. Make sure no other woman ever has to beg for mercy in these halls again." Applause rose, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Even the board members who remained untainted bowed their heads. As Emily and Roy left the room, sunlight streamed through the glass walls, spilling warmth across the polished floor. Outside, cameras were already waiting, eager for sound bites. But Emily didn't stop for the microphones this time. She simply said one sentence before stepping into the elevator. "Justice isn't loud, it's lasting." And as the doors closed, the Sanders family finally left behind the empire that once broke them, rebuilt now on truth, not power. The courthouse stood like a gray monolith against the winter sky, surrounded by a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. Crowds gathered outside the tall steps, chanting Emily's name, holding signs that read, "Justice for Leo," and "No one above the law." The case of the state versus Bradley Connors had become the biggest legal drama of the decade. Inside, the courtroom hummed with tension. The polished wood benches were packed with journalists, lawyers, and curious onlookers. At the front, Bradley Connors sat in a dark suit, thinner now, his face hard and hollow. Gone was the smug millionaire who once commanded rooms with his charm. In his place sat a man cornered by truth. Emily entered quietly, her hand resting on the small cross Father Jonathan had given her. The murmurs in the courtroom softened as she walked past, the woman who'd survived scandal, betrayal, and near death. Behind her, Roy Sanders followed, his expression unreadable, his presence alone reminding everyone that power could be righteous too. Judge Hollister, a woman known for her uncompromising integrity, banged the gavel. Court is now in session. The prosecution began with precision. They played the recording from Vanessa Hale, the one that had spread across the nation. Bradley's voice filled the courtroom, arrogant and undeniable. "Delete every trace of the marriage. If she opens her mouth, I'll ruin her. I'll ruin them all." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Bradley's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is character assassination." "Overruled," Judge Hollister said sharply. "Sit down, Mr. Locke." The prosecutor turned to Emily, who sat on the witness stand. "Miss Sanders, could you tell the court what happened the night you were attacked?" Her throat tightened, but she didn't waver. "He hit me," she said simply. "In front of everyone. I was 8 months pregnant. When I fell, I begged him to help me. He turned away, slammed his palm on the table. She's lying." The judge's gavel cracked down. "One more outburst, Mr. Connors, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Emily met his glare for the first time in months. "You spent years trying to silence me, Bradley, but the truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to be heard." The prosecutor smiled faintly. "No further questions." Then came the defense. Bradley's lawyer rose, trying to twist the narrative. "Miss Sanders, you claim my client fabricated documents. Isn't it possible these files were altered by your father's company to frame him?" Emily's gaze stayed steady. "Possible? Maybe. But the metadata on every document was traced to your client's personal laptop, and the IT specialist who confirmed it works for the FBI, not my father." The courtroom broke into quiet laughter. The defense attorney paled. When it was time for closing arguments, the prosecutor stood before the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't about a marriage. It's about power. Bradley Connors believed he could buy truth, erase it, and rebuild it in his image. But truth isn't for sale. Emily Sanders proved that. Her courage, not her wealth, brought this man here today." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood, hands trembling. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Bradley Connors, guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, and aggravated assault." The gavel came down like thunder. "Sentenced to 20 years in federal prison." Bradley froze, disbelief etched into every feature. "You can't do this. I made you all rich." 2 marshals gripped his arms. "Not anymore," one said quietly. As he was led away, he looked at Emily one last time, but she didn't flinch. She just held her son's photo in her hand and whispered, "We're free." Outside, as the verdict spread, church bells rang across downtown. Father Jonathan smiled from the courthouse steps. "Justice," he murmured, "isn't loud, but today it certainly echoes." Roy placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "It's over." Emily looked toward the sky, tears glistening. "No, Dad," she said softly, "it's just the beginning of peace." The winter trial gave way to spring, and for the first time in years, Emily Sanders could breathe without fear. The chaos that had defined her life was gone. No lawyers, no flashing cameras, no whispers following her down every corridor. What remained was silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. 3 months after Bradley's sentencing, Emily stood on the balcony of her new apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. The city glimmered beneath her like a living jewel, and the sound of waves against the pier reminded her she was finally free. Leo slept peacefully in his crib, wrapped in a soft blue blanket embroidered with tiny stars. Father Jonathan visited often, usually bringing pastries and peace. This morning he arrived with both. "You look lighter," he said with a smile, handing her a coffee. "I am," Emily admitted. "For the first time, I wake up without checking the news or bracing for another attack. It feels strange." "Strange can be good," he said, taking a seat near the window. "Strange means new beginnings." She looked out over the lake, thoughtful. I used to think my life ended the day he hit me, but maybe that was just the day it began. Jonathan nodded. Pain doesn't end a story, it rewrites it. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. When Emily opened it, Roy stood there, dressed casually for once. No suit, no boardroom mask. He carried a folded newspaper in his hand and a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen since childhood. I didn't know you read the Chicago Tribune, she teased gently. He handed it to her with a faint smile. The headline read, Emily Sanders launches art therapy program for trauma survivors. Below it was a photo of her surrounded by children, painting bright murals on a hospital wall. I didn't think you'd make front-page news again so soon, Roy said. But I should have known. Emily blushed. It's just a pilot program. I wanted to give back, to women, to kids, to anyone who needs to remember what hope looks like. Father Jonathan leaned forward. You found your calling. Maybe, Emily said softly. I just know that painting kept me sane when everything fell apart. If it can do that for one other person, it's worth it. Roy's voice grew gentle. You've turned your pain into purpose. That's something no one can take from you. She looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw not the powerful man the world feared, but the broken one who had nearly lost his family to pride. You've changed too, she said. Roy smiled faintly. You changed me first. There was a long silence filled only by the soft cooing of baby Leo from the other room. Would you like to hold him? Emily asked. Roy hesitated, then nodded. When she placed the baby in his arms, his stern composure cracked completely. He looks like you, he murmured. Or maybe like Mom, Emily whispered. His eyes glistened. Your mother would have been proud of you, Emily. For the first time, she didn't cry at the mention of her mother. Instead, she smiled. Then I'm proud too. As the day waned, the three of them, Emily, Roy, and Father Jonathan, sat together on the balcony watching the sun sink behind the skyline. It wasn't the end of a tragedy anymore. It was the quiet beginning of a legacy. Emily looked down at Leo, who reached for her finger with his tiny hand. He's going to grow up knowing the truth, she said. That strength isn't about power, it's about peace. Father Jonathan raised his coffee in a small toast. To peace, then, hard-earned and holy. Roy nodded. And to the women who remind the world that no one can silence truth forever. Emily smiled, her heart full for the first time in years. Amen to that. The lake shimmered in the fading light, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang soft, steady, and free. Summer had arrived in Chicago, and with it, warmth returned to the lives that winter had nearly broken. The scars of betrayal still lived beneath Emily Sanders' skin, but now they no longer burned. They reminded her she had survived. 3 months after Leo's first birthday, the grand atrium of St. Clair Medical Center buzzed with anticipation. Banners hung from the ceiling that read, Art Heals, a celebration of courage. Emily's new foundation had funded the renovation of the Children's Recovery Wing, transforming gray walls into canvases of color. She stood at the center of it all, paintbrush in hand, wearing jeans splattered with acrylic. Around her, kids painted clouds, flowers, and suns across the walls. Every stroke of color felt like redemption. Father Jonathan watched from the doorway, smiling. I never thought I'd see this hospital filled with joy again, he said. Emily laughed softly. Neither did I. It used to feel like the end of my life. Now it feels like the beginning of something bigger. Roy approached from behind them, dressed casually but dignified as always. You've turned pain into art, Emily, he said, admiring a mural of bright orange birds taking flight. That's something money can't buy. She turned to him with a smile. You helped me remember who I was. I just had to paint the rest. Nearby, cameras flashed. The media had come, not for scandal this time, but to celebrate her work. Reporters asked questions, their tones warm and respectful. Miss Sanders, one journalist called out, your program has already helped dozens of trauma survivors. What inspired you to start it here, of all places? Emily looked up at the painted ceiling. Because this is where I lost everything, and found myself again. Healing doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. If these walls once heard my cries, now they'll echo laughter instead. The crowd applauded. After the ceremony, she slipped away to the hospital garden, her favorite place of quiet. Leo toddled ahead, chasing sunlight between the benches. His giggles floated through the air like music. Father Jonathan joined her, holding 2 lemonades. You look content, he said. I am, Emily replied. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm surviving, I'm living. He nodded. Peace looks good on you. Just then, Roy appeared with a small envelope. A letter arrived this morning, he said, from the state penitentiary. Emily froze. From him? Roy hesitated, then handed it to her. You don't have to read it. But she did. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Bradley's handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. Emily, I've had time to think. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I see now what I destroyed. You were never my enemy. You were my mirror, showing me everything I refused to face. I'm sorry. Tell Leo, I hope he becomes half the person you are. Bradley. She read it twice before folding it back into the envelope. Silence lingered between them. Father Jonathan spoke first. You don't have to answer him. I won't, she said softly. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. It just means release. Roy placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let that be your final goodbye. She smiled faintly. It already is. Leo came running up, holding a bright yellow flower. Mama, look. Emily knelt, accepting it. It's beautiful, she whispered. As they walked back toward the atrium, the murals gleamed in the afternoon light, children's laughter echoing through halls that once knew only pain. Father Jonathan watched from the doorway, whispering a quiet prayer. From ashes to light, amen. And as Emily lifted Leo into her arms, his tiny hand brushed the painted wall, a symbol of rebirth that would outlive every wound, every lie, every scar. For the first time in a long time, Emily Sanders didn't just survive the story. She had rewritten it. Autumn swept across Chicago like a golden wave. The air smelled of crisp leaves and distant rain, and the lake shimmered under the fading sun. For Emily Sanders, it had been a year since the trial. A year since her name was restored, her heart reclaimed, and her silence broken. The world had moved on from the scandal, but she hadn't forgotten. The pain had become her teacher, the truth her compass. And today, both would lead her back to the place where everything began, St. Catherine's Cathedral. She arrived quietly, wearing a long beige coat and holding Leo's hand. He was toddling now, full of mischief, his laughter echoing through the ancient stone archway. Inside, Father Jonathan waited near the altar, his familiar warmth filling the quiet space. Welcome home, he said, his eyes soft with pride. Emily smiled faintly. It feels different now. Last time I came here, I was hiding. Today, I came to give thanks. She knelt before the altar, closing her eyes. In her heart, images flickered like old film. The slap, the cold hospital floors, the flashing cameras, the betrayal. But then came newer visions. Her father's embrace, her child's first cry, the colors of her art program painting over the gray walls of sorrow. When she opened her eyes, the pain was still there, but it no longer owned her. Father Jonathan joined her in silence. Then he said softly, "There's something I never told you." She turned. "What is it?" "The night I called your father," he said, "I wasn't sure he'd come. I thought he might turn away, the way pride often does. But when he arrived, he didn't hesitate. He looked at you lying there and said, 'If she breathes, I'll give everything to make it right.' That's when I knew redemption doesn't belong to saints. It belongs to those who choose to love again." Emily's eyes shimmered. "He never told me that." "Some truths don't need to be spoken to be real," Jonathan said with a smile. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed behind them. Roy Sanders entered the cathedral carrying a small box wrapped in velvet. He looked years younger now, as though forgiving himself had taken years off his life. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "It's your mother's birthday today." Emily blinked, surprised. "I forgot. She loved this place." Roy nodded and opened the box. Inside lay a gold locket, old, elegant, with a small picture of a young woman inside. "She wore this the day you were born. I think it's time it returns to you." Emily's breath caught as she touched it. "Dad?" "She would have wanted you to have it," he said softly. "You carry her strength." She clasped the locket around her neck, her fingers trembling. "Thank you." Father Jonathan watched, a quiet smile playing on his lips. "The circle is closing, isn't it?" Roy chuckled. "Maybe it's just beginning." Emily looked toward the stained glass window above the altar, a depiction of a lion surrounded by light. Leo tugged at her coat, pointing up. "Mama, that's me," he said proudly. She laughed, lifting him into her arms. "Yes, sweetheart, that's you, brave and shining." As they stood there together, The woman who had fallen, the father who had repented, and the child who symbolized hope. Sunlight poured through the glass, draping them in gold. Outside, the city bells began to ring, their echoes rolling through the streets like a hymn. Father Jonathan whispered a final blessing. From brokenness to grace, from silence to song, may this family never forget what was rebuilt through faith. Emily held Leo close and smiled. We won't. And as the bells continued to toll, her laughter joined their sound, a melody of freedom, forgiveness, and the beautiful noise of a life redeemed. A full year had passed since justice was served. The city had changed, but so had Emily Sanders. No longer a headline or a symbol of tragedy, she had become something far greater, an emblem of hope. Her story had inspired foundations across the country, helping women rebuild their lives after loss, betrayal, and abuse. Yet on this morning, as the first light of dawn spilled across the horizon, she wanted only one thing: peace. The Sanders estate outside Chicago had been restored to life. Where silence and grief once lingered, laughter now echoed. Leo's laughter, bright and contagious. The garden, once overgrown and gray, bloomed again under Emily's care. Roses lined the paths her mother had planted years before, their scent mixing with the fresh air of early spring. Emily sat on the porch, a mug of tea warming her hands. She watched her son chase butterflies across the grass, his golden hair catching the sun. For a moment, everything felt still, like time itself had paused to let her breathe. Father Jonathan arrived just after sunrise, walking up the long gravel path with his ever-present calm. You look peaceful, he said, smiling. I think I finally am, Emily replied. For so long I thought happiness would come when the pain disappeared, but it's still here, Father, just quieter now, like a shadow that knows its place. He nodded approvingly. That's healing. Pain doesn't vanish, it transforms, it teaches. Before she could answer, Roy Sanders joined them, carrying a newspaper under his arm and 2 cups of coffee. His once stern face now held something lighter, a gentleness age had long denied him. He handed her the paper. The headline read, Emily Sanders receives National Humanitarian Award. Her eyes widened. I didn't even know they were considering me. Roy grinned. They were. You've changed lives, Emily, thousands of them. You deserve this. Father Jonathan chuckled softly. You've come a long way from that frightened woman in a hospital bed. Emily looked toward the lake, shimmering in the morning light. I guess life has a strange way of giving us back what we thought we'd lost. I used to pray for revenge. Now I just pray for peace. As she spoke, a soft wind carried the faint toll of church bells from the distance, steady, familiar, eternal. Leo came running up, his tiny hands clutching a daisy. Mama, for you. Emily knelt, taking the flower with a smile. Thank you, my brave boy. Roy bent down beside them, his voice low. You know, your mother loved daisies. She said they were proof that beauty can grow anywhere, even after storms. Emily's eyes softened. Then I guess she was right. Father Jonathan raised his face to the sky. You've rebuilt everything he tried to destroy, not through anger, but through love. That's legacy, Emily. That's grace. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from sorrow. They were the kind of tears that come when the soul finally exhales. She turned to her father and the priest, her voice steady. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is, not saying what happened was okay, but deciding it won't define you anymore. Roy smiled faintly. You've become the kind of woman your mother dreamed of, strong, kind, unshakable. Emily laughed softly. And stubborn. Don't forget stubborn. They all laughed, quiet, genuine laughter that carried across the garden. As the sun rose higher, painting the world in gold, Emily lifted Leo into her arms. He giggled, reaching toward the light, and for a moment she felt something divine, a promise fulfilled. She whispered to her son, We're free, Leo. Truly free. Father Jonathan made the sign of the cross, his voice barely above a whisper. Amen. And as the final scene of their story unfolded, the father reconciled, the priest redeemed, and the woman reborn, the camera of life lingered on the sunrise. The world would remember her not as the wife who fainted, not as the woman who suffered, but as the mother who rose. So, my friends, that's how our story comes to an end. You're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with us all the way until now, maybe something in Emily's journey touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Because this story isn't just about pain or revenge, it's about rebirth. About learning, as the Stoics taught, that We suffer more in imagination than in reality, Seneca. Emily learned to let go of anger, not because her past didn't matter, but because peace mattered more. She showed us that true strength isn't about fighting back, it's about choosing to rise quietly with dignity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." And that's what healing really is, turning the things that broke us into the things that build us. So maybe now you can look at your own scars and say, "I survived, therefore I am stronger." If Emily's story reached something inside you, if it made you feel seen, hopeful, or even a little braver, then don't keep that feeling to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe so more hearts can heal through stories like this one. Because sometimes, the right story finds us exactly when we need it most.